So I didn't get a chance to do the pre-show, but yeah, hope everybody's well. It's great to see. We've got Lauren Sakai, long time no see, good to see you back in the comments. Sergeant Bilko, Steve from Berkeley, hello indeed, and good to see you all. So actually I'm kind of curious. As you can see, this last week I've been doing a few new and different things. I guess it's the start of the year. It's the time to shake things up, and what I've been doing is basically, after I record the show every week, I've been downloading it, putting it on my iPhone and an iMovie for where there's been like what I think is an interesting topic. I've been cutting it out into a short, so that basically people who the show hasn't really grown for like a year, so I had the thought that yeah, it'd be good to make the content of it a little bit more accessible to people who are not that familiar. By the way, I wonder if the comment capture is working. Can someone put some comments there, because I'm worried that it's not capturing, which it should be capturing because I haven't changed it. But anyway, so yeah, I figured it's a chance to help people discover the content, and yeah, and look at that. Oh, that's so frustrating. Why is that not there? Hang on a sec. Let me just see if I change the scene. Will it capture the comments? Somebody comment something. Hey Chris Jack, good to see you. Hey, long time no see, man. Good to see some familiar names and faces there in the avatars. But you know what? Damn, the comment's broken tonight. Oh, there it is. Now it's working. Well, that did the trick, whatever it is. Howdy do indeed, good to see all of you people. Azamanga Davo, good to see you, Davo. Glad to be here. There we go, shortcut for the topics, so good for those watching afterwards. So exactly, if you feel like the long version, if you want to join me live, or you want to watch the full show and actually get all the updates and everything like that, I love that you join for me for this. But again, for people, the show hasn't really grown, and yeah, I like to think I cover a lot of interesting stuff, and sometimes it's fun to see it's good to see the reactions on the individual components of it. So I've been releasing, just basically cutting 2 or 3 short versions of the videos and uploading them during the week, and you know, it keeps the channel sort of ticking over as well. Quit ranking, boom, that's just for you, because my second update is, you may have noticed on Wednesday I rebooted Japan Business Time. In fact, boom, let's get into the topics. You know that this is coming, of course, we're coming up to that tonight. Maybe skipping ahead, we had our first episode of season 3 of Japan Business Time. This had been in the can, unedited, for 3 years. We finally got it up this week, and yeah, I put it up as, there's a new feature on YouTube called a premiere, which is when you upload a video, you can schedule a time for it to go live, and you can actually have it count down as a big premiere live video. So basically what's cool about that is, it's a bit like me recording this show, for example, and then after it's recorded it and uploading it, I can set a time that's like easy for everyone to watch, plus I can join in the comments. And in this one, Rochelle and I joined in the comments live during the premiere. So it was recorded 3 years ago, but it was like we were able to join and watch it simultaneously with you guys live, even though it's a short video, it's only about 10 minutes. And that was kind of fun, being able to discuss live in the comments with people, like not having to focus on what I'm presenting, which is something I always wish I could do. So experimented with that, it worked really well. There's one thing that I did that people didn't like, which is that I uploaded all 9 episodes of Japan Business Time, and I premiered them for the same Wednesday night Japan time every week. And some people, apparently it made all the episodes pop up in people's feeds, and people were saying, why would you even schedule a premiere like 3 months ahead? And I was like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize it was going to be spamming your feed. And I kind of took that comment and I thought, yeah, well, I can just turn on and prepare the schedule a week ahead. So I'm going to do that from now on. I actually privatized the other videos. So basically, we'll put one of these up per week, so every Wednesday going forward. And the next one is Quint Rankit. This is your subject. Employee performance and faux pas. In fact, if I can, it was you and Zoblade, I think, came up with this topic. Well, one was asking about the topic of what kind of faux pas can a foreigner carrier do at work, and the other was how employees assessed for performance in Japan. Both great topics. Rochelle is the perfect person to ask. We had an awesome ramen set, so if you haven't seen it yet, please go check out the Nominication episode. Do you have to drink? Like, how important is it to go out drinking in Japanese culture? So that was great this week. Again, hope you enjoyed the shorts. I actually find myself, it's actually easier to watch the shorts back and relive the comments, and yeah, just for myself as well, so that was kind of cool. With MyChan TV, there's some news. So I've been investigating different platforms, and I basically settled on not using Amazon Pay. I'm not entitled to, because you've got to be a company to use that. So I'm just going to use Stripe for the built-in subscriptions. And like I said before, I'm going to do two-tier, which is that I'm going to actually open up a Patreon. And the idea is, I haven't set the amounts yet, I've got to figure it out. But basically, I want to do things, I do want to make like a mobile app and a TV app, and there are features I do want to add to MyChan, even though it works perfectly well already. But for all of these things, I need to make it a little bit self-sustaining, because right now it's all going out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a direct subscription for MyChan for people who, just want to support MyChan. And because I got the feedback that there are people who just want to support me being able to do these things and other projects, not just that, in future, I took all that on board, and I'm going to set up a Patreon where above a certain amount on Patreon, and again, I'll keep it low, I don't want to ask for a lot, but the idea is that's going to be for people who just generally want to support me. I'll set a different amount on Patreon, and give the people who support me on Patreon pro access to MyChan. So that's coming ahead. The feature that I'm going to add, there's another cool thing, especially I see that Lauren is here in the comments, and Lauren is one of my power users on MyChan TV. So I've really been enjoying using it lately. I've gotten back into keeping up with subscriptions now that I've done a massive cleanup again, thanks to the features I have on MyChan, that I can unsubscribe channels there. I can see how active channels are. So I've got my feed into really good shape. And one thing that I found was I was looking for a way that I could try to remotely control. Basically, I want to be able to go to the end of a video to skip to the next one in the automatic YouTube player, and I was looking for remotes that could do it, presentation remotes, and those apps couldn't really, they're like presenter sticks. I thought that would be really good, for PowerPoint stuff, and I thought I'd maybe get one of those. And then I discovered, no, those are fixed, and they only work for the page up, page down keys for PowerPoint. So I was thinking, well, can I get a presenter stick that I could customize the keys, so I could use it as a MyChan TV remote? And you can do that with some, but it's kind of a hassle, and I wasn't sure if it would always work. And then it occurred to me there must be an app that does that, and I found this app called Remote Mouse Pro, which I basically just set up on my computer, and this thing turns your phone into a touchpad and a keyboard, and it means that I can use this as a remote control for MyChan TV playing on my computer. And that was really cool. So I told that to the dev. So as well as wanting to get the subscription thing connected, get the new pro features for people like Lauren, who have always been a great beta tester for me as well, so can tell me what's working and what's not. I also showed him that, and he's like, well, that looks like it would be easy to do, so maybe it would even do something like that. So again, there is innovation coming back to, yes, exactly. So the thing is, the original idea of MyChan TV was to be able to sit back and just let your subscriptions play like TV. But then I realized what you really do with TV nowadays is you DVR it, and you skip ahead, or you just skip to the next one if you're going through a list, but this one I can watch later. So the first feature I'm going to add when we do the Pro build is that for the Pro users, you're going to get a feature where you'll be able to filter the playlist by duration, so you can just focus on watching shorter videos or longer videos. But the remote thing, I just realized, when you want to sit back from the computer and be able to hit the end key on the keyboard to be able to skip to the next video, sometimes, just next, or to speed up. And yeah, that's achievable with this remote mouse app, which is, you got to pay for it. It's like $2.40, but for me, this could be kind of used in a way that really works well with the app. So we have ideas and things to do, so look out for some innovations coming up with MyChan TV this year anyway, and we're just kicking off the new build, so look out for more announcements on that. Lots of announcements. Jeez, that's 10 minutes in already. Let's see who's in the comments, and also go back to that, to the cover thing. So who is in the comments? Let's say hello to everybody. I see everybody piling in, which is great to see. We've got Lauren Sakai, Sergeant Bilko, Steve from Berkeley, Chris, Jack, Azamunga, Dave. I've already said hello to you guys, Davo. We've got Believe in Yourself. Good to see you, Quint Ranked. Yes, who is the contributor of the sub. And this is another thing. When you're watching Japan Business Time, please do what Quint did, which is write in the comments your ideas for the next season, because Rochelle and I have seen the new videos, and we'd forgotten what was in them, and we were just stoked. It came out really well. So it came out really well, though, because you guys provided the subjects for the next season. We went through all the comments on all the Japan Business Time videos, and we created the new all the new episodes, 9 episodes for the new season. So if you want your topics to be featured, any question you have about working in Japanese companies, or Japanese companies coming to America, or intercultural working, shenanigans, please put them in the comments of those videos. and they will get made. The proof is in the pudding. Quint Rankid, your video is featuring next for episode 2 of season 3 of Japan Business Time, After Work Edition with Rochelle Kopp. So that'll be pretty cool. Who else we got here? So I think I just said hello to Believe in Yourself. Great to see you again. Indeed, we've got Jace Mackey. Good to see you. It was good to discover the first couple of seasons. I'm glad you enjoyed. So this is, yes, as you can see, I've been putting on the end of the videos the links to the previous seasons, so you can actually watch the complete series all the way through. And this one will add, and I'm building up some expectation. We're releasing them a bit at a time, but that is pretty cool. Razo, good to see you, sir. In fact, I just remember now, you were asking a question about hikikomori that I haven't covered tonight. So I might come back and actually talk to that after I'm done with the greetings, because you are correct. It's definitely not a new thing. Who else we got here? Food Butomom. Good to see you. Tokyo Sam like tonight. Tokyo Sam like tonight. I'm not sure if that is actually Sam under a different name or whatever, but yeah. Razogul, Serpensa, yes, and well, speaking of Sam, Tokyo Sam has met Serpensa. When Serpensa came to Japan, of all the people in Japan that Serpensa could meet, he met Tokyo Sam, which shows Sam, he's a connected guy, seriously. I mean, that was really, I've only discovered Serpensa like in the last 2 or 3 months, again, thanks to MyChan TV, because I've been able to watch more of his stuff, and he is really good, and he did a video I'm about to talk about, which was actually just really thought-provoking about the world in general, so that was pretty good. Piggles de Gaijin, hey man, good to see you. Again, the cricket, I don't know how West Indies has been doing lately. Whenever I see Jamaicans, I think cricket, because, you know, I'm from New Zealand. And, yes, there's, I don't know if you're into cricket at all, or maybe I'm stereotyping, but good to see you, sir, and hope that you are well. Indeed, I also saw that you were featured recently on a video of, now I might get this wrong, I forget the name of the channel, but it's basically, people of color, I believe, and their experience of Japan, and there have been a few really good episodes of that. Black Experience Japan is what I think it's called. Was that the one that you were on, or was it a different one? Am I getting mixed up? But I saw a video of yours recently, so good to see you, sir. Jason's All Sumo channel. Another video that I cut out that I got great feedback on, and it wasn't from this show, it was from 2.5 Oyajis when we got Jason's All Sumo channel. By the way, Tamawashi, right, he won tonight, so that's some big news there. Your explanation about you know, what happened to Kiseno Sato, people loved that. And that came out as like a perfect 7-minute explanatory video, and that was that man right there, Jason's All Sumo channel. He just explained it so beautifully, and when I watched it back, I was like, damn, you know, yeah, that was really good, so thank you for that. We got a great little mini video out of that from 2.5 Oyajis that people really appreciate. So yeah, go subscribe, of course, to my Argonauts and Jason's All Sumo channel if you're into that stuff, and I'd love to hear in the comments from you, Jason's All Sumo channel, what you think about the win today. And it wasn't Takayasu, it wasn't the guy that you picked to be the next Yokozuna, so I guess he's got to wait. And there were no Yokozunas, right? Hakuho to pull out as well, so the field was open, so that'll be interesting. Tai Nakamura, great to see you, and indeed he did, well, so yes, continue that chat in the comments, please, because he did pull out, and that was a bit of drama there. Oh man, Jace Mackey, you've been shoveling snow, that sucks, I'm sorry to hear that. Radri, good to see you. What is the season finale this year, the season finale of Japan Business Time? What is the subject? That is a good question. I could check that right now, but that would be too distracting. So there are a bunch of extremely exciting comments and topics because you guys provided them, so thank you for that. Good to see you, Radri, and again, thank you for having me on your show the other week. And everybody check out Radri is continuing to put out interviews with YouTubers every week, and they're good. I mean, they're in Radri's style, which I actually quite enjoy, and my pleasure to be on a part of it, sir. So yes, we've got who else? We've got Setsuna, good to see you. You're getting earlier and earlier as it goes. I don't know what that means. The J Vlog, yes indeed. Hello lads. Dre, Dr. Dre, no, it's actually Andre Piggles, and I believe that you're talking to, and good to see you all. So yeah, let's come back quickly to Raz. He had a question for me actually, which I didn't include in the not just YouTubers indeed. Bold Burlitz boy, I'm sorry, did I miss you out? No, definitely. Good evening, and the best sort of Burlitz boy, if you ask me. Creators inside or outside Japan. So anyway, go check out Radri. Raz, he actually asked me a question during the week. He noticed that I noticed this too. There was a feature on BBC about hikikomori, about shut-ins basically. And like most things that when Western media is covering Japan, they like to cover things in Japan as if they're like these weird, unique Japanese cultural phenomenon, which hikikomori, well, there's a word for it in Japanese, and I suppose there are Japanese flavors of hikikomori, but one, it's not new, two, it certainly isn't unique. And 3, although the BBC said it was about men who stay at home with their parents, which I don't know what the statistics are, I don't know if it's a majority men or not, it certainly is not restricted to men. I mean, there was a particular story talking about women who go up and try to counsel and help hikikomori guys get out in the world. Certainly hikikomori, well, again, shut-ins exist everywhere. It's a human thing, right? People who can't face society, who can't go out in the world, they become shut-ins, recluses, they stay with their parents. Perhaps there is a Japanese flavor to it, particularly in the tolerance of parents to allow their kids to stay, plus the expense of living outside. You have these people, maybe they start out not as full-on shut-ins, but certainly from the elements of, within Japanese society, of things like pressure in school, bullying, which and this happens in New Zealand more than Japan, actually, the bullying at school and the youth suicide and so on. Yet in spite of that, it does seem more common in Japan for people to stop attending school, for example. Again, I don't know why in New Zealand it's less common, but yeah. Hey Tomoel, good to see you. You're good at hikikomori. I don't know what you mean that you're good at it, but yes, you know, this thing where I think Japanese society is for whatever reason more tolerant in a way of, you know, parents are more tolerant of kids who don't want to go to school, and they keep them at home. They let them not attend, and these people become adults, and sometimes actually there are hikikomori who have become great programmers, game developers, mangaka, and so on. You know, it's kind of funny. Japan is a society where it's you can still be relatively productive. There are companies that make a thing about employing only hikikomori. We live in an age when this is possible. So there's kind of a bit of an ecosystem almost sustaining this behavior, even though generally in other societies, maybe the reason we don't have them so much in New Zealand is perhaps because it's just so difficult to exist. You know, you don't have delivery maybe you do now, but you certainly didn't in my day have delivery groceries. You know, we didn't even have internet when I left, actually, barely. We'd only had it for a couple of years. Perhaps it's because Japan's so comfortable being shut in, but yeah, it's not new. I don't know what's triggered the recent interest in it. I guess you get these things, you know, it's like the underwear and vending machines, or, you know, one minute all Japanese are going crazy having too much sex, the next minute they're not having sex at all, the next minute they're having sex with pillows or something. You know, and it's like when it comes out, it's like this one weird thing that someone finds and they release it. It's unique, it's new, and I'm the one who discovered it, and it's usually wrong. Don't trust the BBC. But yes, indeed, hikikomori are a thing. They're definitely not new, and I don't know why it's being covered. Boom. Into the topics. So first thing, I want to give a big shout out to Tokyo Bribes. Tokyo Bribes, she did a great job on this. As you know, on this, what I do on this show, and the objective of this show, is to try to read you the highlights of the news of the week, but not the way that, you know, the nightly news tells the news as it happened that day, you know, and they tell you each step of the story. They don't refresh you on the whole story so far. They don't give you the context, and this is what is challenging, especially when you're coming to Japan and the whole country's brand new and you want to watch the news and get it, but, you know, you have to watch the news for a while before you're really understanding, you know, what's all the cultural background to this, where did the story come from, how did this evolve. And what I try to do is I try to explain the news quickly to you, not so much doing a deep dive. I don't do deep dives. I basically just gather up all the news stories I found most interesting this week, and when I explain them, I explain with the cultural and with the timeline background to make the news stories easier to understand. So basically, I kind of try to make it easier to get without giving huge enlightenment per se about the details of the story itself. I really do enjoy watching Still a Sexy Phil. You know, his series, and people who, you know, he's got a team of people that help him dive into the, you know, who actually go and do detailed research, and he gets these researchers that prepare really great detailed explanations of news stories. He dives a lot deeper than me, and I don't dive deep. I'm just skimming over the news and picking out stories that are interesting and explaining them, and I did that with the NGT48 story, in the sense of not so much giving so much extra detail about the incident itself. I gave a very high level incident just like the news, but I went into, you know, this whole thing. I don't understand why a parent would ever allow their daughter to get into the idol industry, because it's creepy, and this is why, and I explain that more and more. However, I really respect what Tokyo Bribes did with her video on this, where it's like a 15-minute video where she explains the story in detail. She did the opposite of me, whereas I went through the general, this is how idols are in Japan and why the whole thing is a bit messed up and you should understand this. She went into the story and she explained it really well, and it's an interesting story. And she explained it in really great detail. She researched it great. She should do more videos like this. there's a gap for it because I'm not doing this. I don't have the time. So really, I don't know certainly if you're into the story, you have to watch this. Even if you're not into the story, if you want to understand a little bit more about what's going on, like a 60 minutes type deep dive on this, her video, Japanese idol assaulted, forced to apologize. Exactly what it is. Go check this out. This is a really, really good video, and go subscribe to it, Tokyo Bribery. In fact, I will try to remember to put a link in the description afterwards. Before, we were just talking about Serpensa. And he is awesome, and again, another person I'll recommend to everybody. I've been meaning to share this for a while because I've had this particular video come up in my head a few times. Serpensa is like me, I suppose. He's a South African, not a New Zealander. He lives in China, not Japan. He's lived there for like 15 years. He's got a business. And again, he provides these sort of walking around long talking videos where he's basically giving context and understanding with his own strong opinions sometimes about life in China, the good, the bad. And what I find is that what he does is he really there's so much of a simplistic narrative about China, that China good, China bad, China do this. Even when you're in Japan, frankly, China is this big boogeyman hanging over Japan, and people have this idea, they boil it down easily to stereotypes. Chinese cut into line, Chinese, because of the Cultural Revolution or whatever, don't have manners, and Chinese come on tours to Japan wearing pajamas. They, all these kind of weird things. Food in China isn't safe. All of these stereotypes, and it's kind of funny when you start watching Serpensa's videos for like less than 5 minutes. Seriously, 2 minutes in, you'll be realizing, oh yeah, like this is a country of like what now, 1.3 billion people, 10 times the population of Japan. We do so much to reduce and boil down what China is. It's communist. Everybody's oppressed by this political system. There's all these sort of ideas about China. And you think of any country with 1 million people, and then you think about a country with 10 million people, and how complex that and diverse that is. Then you think about a country with 100 million people. Then you think like America, 300 million people, and then you multiply it by 3 times again, and you get China. It's an incredibly diverse and complex country, and not a lot of people are really able to talk about it. Kind of doing what I try to do for Japan, providing all that context to actually give a 3-dimensional picture of the place. And he does really, really great videos, and I'm not really that much of a China freak, but he just explains it so well. It's like, wow, okay, this guy's really cool. He makes very, very good videos, by the way, which I guess is in contrast to me. This video I thought was interesting, and it kind of hooked my interest because I thought, oh, he's going to talk about, because he says this sometimes, about how, the old thing about car crashes in China, there's this kind of rule that I've heard of, that you don't help car crash victims because, like pedestrians who've been injured, because there's this, sometimes what will happen is the victims who have been hit by cars and hit and runs will target Good Samaritans and accuse them of doing it in order to get them to pay for the hospital, for example. Right? He's talked about a few episodes of things where he's found unethical behavior, and he wanted to talk about it, and I was like, okay, I want to hear about this. Basically, honestly speaking, probably going in expecting to have my negative stereotypes validated. I went in with a biased mindset to watching this. He gave a really, really great explanation of this thing. And what I loved about the explanation he gave about what he calls the moral crisis in China is he explains kind of how morality, is different to his concept of morality. But when he explains it, and the way he explains it, you realize this light goes on. Damn, he's not just talking about China. China is, it's so easy to forget this. China is a bunch of people, and we draw lines, we have languages, we do have cultures, but basically the phenomenon that he was describing is actually probably how 90% of the world works. He basically explained how, particularly in the past and even still today, it's this whole thing, the difference between being from a country where people's basic needs, income, job, family, when people's basic needs are met, when the survival instinct is when the day-to-day sort of not being sure if you're going to eat or not kind of period of development is surpassed, people can slowly merge into prioritizing things like the mutual benefit of there being orderliness, or the mutual benefit of the idea of trying to spontaneously help strangers and things like that. And he explains that the aspects where, for example, where he caught pickpockets, where he saved someone from a pickpocket and was told off for doing that by his co-workers, and episodes like that, and where he can film crime happening anywhere, scams, crime, and it boils his blood, and he talks about this and he features it, but he pulls it back into a context, which is that historically a lot of people in China, like Cultural Revolution, not so long ago, were literally, the entire country was in a state of absolute chaos. People were getting killed everywhere. People couldn't eat. And when you are not sure if you're going to eat, your priority about like standing in line and taking the risk that there might not be enough food for you, like everything, the idea of like greater morality for the purpose of an orderly and structured society falls away, and becomes, morality becomes sort of like getting what you need for you and the people closest to you to survive. And this is something you immediately recognize when you talk about, law and order problems, or needing to be careful when you're traveling in less developed countries, and the mentality that people have in those countries of taking advantage. And he was explaining, when they see a well-to-do person, like a rich Chinese person or a foreigner that they assume is well-to-do, there are people of the mindset of thinking, if this person is not on their guard and gives me an opportunity to take advantage of them, then I am a fool if I do not. Not saying, and he's not saying that's 100%, but he really, really well explained the mindset that is just of people who are in a situation where a country is still developing, and people are still basically trying to survive every day. It made me realize, we really forget. I mean, most of the people watching this, most likely, are living in countries where we don't have to worry about our day-to-day meals, about providing for ourselves or anything like that. But we're like probably less than 5% of the world's population. The majority of the world out there is in a very different mentality. And I guess coming from South Africa, which South Africa itself and every country, by the way, has this sort of hunger mentality, right? This hunger survival. Even in Japan, they have this. South Africa, of course, has wealth. It also has poverty, and also is in a continent which is sort of identified by having these same sort of issues. He explained it so well. I mean, for me, it was like, and I've traveled in South America. I've traveled in places where you have to be constantly on guard for people like robbing you and stuff like that. And I've always thought, why would you be like that? But he just basically explained the mentality and understand. And what I love about him is he explained the mentality really well, and then he completely rejected it and said, these are assholes. That's what I love about him. Really, really thought-provoking. It's a great watch. You should totally go subscribe to him. So Pensa, you can go check out obviously the link below to this magazine, but I'll write the name in here now, and go subscribe to this guy. Now, I have gone 30 minutes and I have not actually started the plan of stories yet, so all my optimism that I was going to be ahead of time is, what can I do? And of course, as John Anderson says, Japan is so the opposite of that. And there's this thing, even Japanese talk about heiwaboke, literally Alzheimer's from peace. Japanese just completely have no sense of safety or self-protection. I get afraid for my Japanese friends when I hear that they're going off to third world countries. But hell, I've probably become like that myself, and New Zealand is safe as hell as well. So I remember having to resent, for example, having to keep my credit card inside my shoe. I thought it was like a stand-up routine, but it's something you really have to do when you travel in some parts of the world. And I had people try to rob me, and I was on my guard, and I was okay when I was there, but I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to go back there now, just it'd be too tiring. And Kimiko, good to see you. So, what else we got? I just talked about Japan Business Times, so check out this week, Employee Performance and Footpath. Thank you, Quentin Rankin, for the subject. That was awesome, and remember, people, to put in your subjects in the comments. The next, I just got a couple of updates on stories that I've been doing week by week, and I don't want to deep dive into them this week. But I do want to go into just some updates, because maybe now if you've been following this week to week, you'll get an idea. So on the radar drama, you'll recall a Korean patrol ship locked missiles on a Japanese patrol airplane inside the Japanese EEZ, or at least an overlapping part of the EEZ, where there was Korean and Japanese economic zones overlapping. This boat, by the way, was engaged in some weird stuff. It was supposedly helping a humanitarian mission with a stricken North Korean fishing boat. Everybody thinks, no, that's dodgy as hell. The fact that they reacted like that, locking missiles on a plane that came close to them, That's some dodgy stuff there. But setting that aside, they locked missiles, and normally Japan sort of knows better than to get to get into this sort of stuff. The Japanese self-defense forces said, "This is not acceptable. Please, Korea, don't do this. Please tell us you won't do this again." They basically wanted to put them in their place. So they released a video of the whole thing. They demanded an apology, and the Korean government and Korean military did kind of what they do and kind of what the North Korean government does, and also frankly what Japanese gangsters do, which is that when you're like cornered by a busybody, morally upright person, you flip it around, you react 10 times worse, and you try to and you basically try to turn the tables on them and create such a problem that you'll make them want to walk away from the whole thing. This is how gangsters work in Japan. It's how North Korean diplomacy works, and it's exactly the playbook that the South Korean government followed here with this. When they said, "Why did you lock these missiles on us?" They flipped the story a few times, and then the South Koreans settled on a narrative that the Japanese patrol plane was flying too low and in an intimidating manner, and it's Japan that needs to apologize for the low flying. And then they started, like, day after day saying, "Oh, we found another low-flying plane. Oh, we found another low-flying plane. Japan apologized." They called in the ambassador. They called in the defense attaché. They released videos in 10 languages. Japan must apologize for the low flying. And finally got to the inevitable conclusion earlier this week that the Japan Self-Defense Forces issued a statement saying, "Okay, we're not gonna get into this anymore. We're tired." And to which the Korean government responded, "You haven't apologized to us yet for the low flying." And this was, by the way, all the low flying. The Japanese Self-Defense Forces checked the data. They said, "No, that's BS. We're flying like we always do." The South Koreans just basically mad dogged them. They basically just turned around and said, "Oh, you want a piece of this? You want a piece of this?" And it worked. They created just such hassle that the Japanese Self-Defense Forces just basically said, "Okay, we give up, whatever." The funniest part about this was yesterday, an official within the Self-Defense Forces, who apparently has access to a Twitter account, apparently tweeted, someone from the Ministry of Defense of Japan tweeted, they actually tweeted, literally, I'm not joking, they tweeted this in Japanese. They wish that they could tow the Japanese islands off the coast of California so that they wouldn't have to deal with this sort of thing anymore, or have these, or have to worry about North Korea. You literally, basically exasperated and exhausted by the South Korean, hyper aggressive reaction to their, will you chill with the radar lock? Literally tweeted publicly that they wish that Japan could be towed off the coast of California. Which, hell, the desire is probably mutual. So that's where that story's gone, and you can bet that in spite of this being one time where it looked like the Japanese would, have the upper hand and be able to, put pressure on the South Koreans, no, this is being added to the list of complaints Korea has about Japan. And this is why I said, nothing ever good happens from getting into this. I mean, it's just kind of funny. Speaking of kind of funny, fruitless efforts, Abe met with Putin after the various pre-meetings between the foreign ministries of Japan and Russia, and you could say that Abe was kind of put in his place. You see what I did? No, he was basically, again, I don't want to go on making analogies of diplomatic strategies to gangster behavior, but the Russians basically said, when they were asked once again, "Are you going to give the Japanese islands back?" They said, "You've got some very nice islands over there. It would be terrible if anything would have happened to them." The Russians made it hyper clear for the umpteenth time that Abe's created this goal that somehow he's just going to charm Putin into giving back territory that the Russians controlled since World War II, and the Russians have basically tried to make it as clear as possible that ain't gonna happen, and stop asking us because it's really annoying. And basically, I think when they did it before the Abe meeting, they were thinking perhaps the Russians are posturing, perhaps they're playing hard to get, perhaps they're going to make it, so that they can give the minimum compromise. But Putin made it pretty clear that no, this isn't posturing. Shinzo, you're going to switch tack and go for something else. You're not getting the islands back. For the whole time I've been in Japan, it is funny, the Japanese media covers this Like, this is something that's just going to happen. It's always been just a matter of timing. It's been a matter of you know, Russia being on a down and Japan being on an up, and the gas having sufficient value to Japan and Russia that they'll agree that these, you know, insignificant islands that really are Japan's anyway will just be given back to it. And it's funny in a way, I suppose, because on the one hand, Japan feels absolutely, you know, certain that they're entitled to these islands back, but at the same time, the Senkaku Islands, the Diaoyutai Islands, that Okinawa occupies, that Japan occupies as part of Okinawa Prefecture, Japan absolutely, you know, those islands have, other than their location and strategic importance, which, by the way, the Kuril Islands have as well, they're not inhabited. They're absolutely less strategically important than these Russian islands, and you know, there have been accounts. I mean, of course, all the foreign ministries have all their different cases that they put forward for the legitimacy, but essentially, the Senkaku Islands were given to Japan as part of a cartographic error by the Americans during the occupation. The Americans incorporated the Senkaku Islands, which some people have said they meant to give them to Taiwan, but they drew a line where they gave them to Okinawa, when Okinawa was, of course, incorporated into America for until 1975, and neither China nor Taiwan wanted to pick a fight with America over those islands. And frankly, no one in PRC even noticed that the islands were missing until like about 1965. But the point being, you know, Japan's expecting that Russia is just going to be reasonable, that these islands are really Japanese, and you know, they are. I mean, they're inhabited. There are towns on these islands and populations of these islands that, you know, are waiting to go back, unlike the Senkaku Islands. But yet Japan's position is absolutely that they dug in on these frankly meaningless rocks when it comes to the China thing, for very much the same reasons that Russia's dug in on these islands that they now occupy with people, that they're strategically important. So basically, there's a great article here in the Nippon Keizai Shimbun basically talking about how, yeah, it's time Japan actually move on now and get over this, you know, basically Japanese relations with Russia, if Japan wants to have relations with Russia, making it contingent on getting these islands back. If that is the case, they're never going to have it. And in a way, the expectation that this was going to happen and making this the blocker, perhaps they could take the summit with Putin as kind of the point where Japan can now break free of that illusion, which is actually probably a good idea. So that story, the whole build-up of Russia, and this whole funny thing about Russia, basically, you know, like, no, you're not getting the islands back. It looks like, hopefully, you know, this is kind of resolved, but we'll see. Another follow-up from last week. Damn, it's 40 minutes in and I'm still doing catch-ups on last week. When I was looking for a thumbnail for the facial hair story with the Osaka subway employees, I found that Tofugu, by the way, one of the most awesome blogs out there. They don't post a lot of stuff, but everything they post is super great, and you should RSS or follow them or whatever. Tofugu posted, they did, again, what I was talking about earlier, what Tokyo Bribes did. They did a deep dive on this subject. Oh, the most fantastic facial hair Japanese culture deep dive I've ever read. If you're interested in the subject, go and read this thing, Why Japan Historically Hates Mustaches and Other Facial Hair Too. And they've got like the detail, they've got the history, they've got the years, they've got the people, they've got the thing, all samurai used to have hige, and then like when they said no more fighting everyone, they had to shave the hige, and then people who had hige, it was like a discrimination thing. It's really well written. It's like awesome, and I made that like the thumbnail on the video which I captured, so thank you for that, Tofugu, but thank you for the awesome explanation. This is like really great. I did link this in the video information of the video that I cut out from last week on this, but certainly if you're interested in the subject of the cultural significance of facial hair in Japan, and not quite as persecuted as tattoos, but kind of close, and Osaka's going after tattoos and facial hair, so for the cultural context this is fantastic. So let's get into the main story this week. Check this out. Of course, you'll immediately recognize from the picture there, Naomi Osaka. So yeah, this is an interesting one. Basically, Nissan, you know, everybody piling on. First of all, Naomi Osaka, I watched live the Australian Open final, and I'm not a tennis person, but I watched basically from the second set. I was taking my son to swimming lessons. I came home, and I watched the match points that Naomi had, and then I watched her meltdown basically and get frustrated and, like, you know, punch a racket on her foot and walk off the court crying, going to the bathroom. And yeah, I saw that meltdown and I thought, well, given that the only other tennis match I'd seen was her versus Serena, where Serena kind of did the same thing, I was like, oh, maybe tennis is just like this. People just like freak out all the time. But no, I'm told this was actually for both players. This was like, complete breakdowns and recoveries in the middle of this game, and it's being pegged as like this game where she won, winning 2 opens in a row. This was like an epic win, and it was fantastic to watch, and huge congratulations. In the meantime, people anticipating Naomi's coming up greatness. The sponsors, the media, of course the media now, oh yes, she's all Japanese, we're all behind her, which is sort of great. There's great significance about that I'm about to talk about. Sponsors piling in as well, also great. It's great for her personally as well to have Japanese advertisers and so on, and get in and support her as a role model for young Japanese people. So it did raise some eyebrows when Nissin, the cup noodle, one of the sponsors, both of Kei Nishikori and Naomi Osaka, the 2 top, and remember, Naomi represents Japan on the circuit. She flies under that flag, even though her father is Haitian, so her mother is Japanese. Obviously, Haiti doesn't sponsor a tennis team, so it always made more sense to take her Japanese nationality, and she was born in Japan and lived in Japan until she was 4 years old, so she's a Japanese citizen. To fly to basically go under the Japanese flag for these events. However, when the cartoon came out, basically an animated cartoons showing these 2 tennis stars, something did grab by McNeil's attention. And as a author of color, actually, I'm a huge fan of his books, particularly Hi, My Name is Loco and I'm a Racist, talking about his experience growing up in a Black Panther community, and then coming out of that and dealing with the way he was indoctrinated, and how that conflicted with and sometimes reinforced views in the real world. And he's a really fantastic writer, and he wrote up his sort of take on this, that please, Japan, don't be whitening, don't be trying to take. Finally, now Japan actually is becoming multi-ethnic. It's becoming multiracial. I talked the other week about how at the coming of age ceremony in Shinjuku in Tokyo, 47% of the 20-year-olds that came for coming of day ceremony in Shinjuku were foreigners, or ethnically foreign. In fact, no, it's actually foreign citizens, so probably ethnically foreign would be even more than that. So, Japan is becoming rapidly, multi-ethnic. Compared to when I got here, and there's like less than 1% of the population were foreigners, and basically anyone who looked like Naomi Osaka was such a minority that people could say, yeah, there's a few people like that, but there's such an insignificant, minority that basically we can say Japan is homogenous. Japan is really changing. I mean, with the population, with the birth rate going down, and the number of international marriages producing births, with multicultural kids now. And the number of those kids that are now coming up in sports and culture, and not setting aside the fact that, of course, the richest man in Japan, Masayoshi Son, is Korean, for example. Fujio Cho, CEO of Toyota, Korean heritage. You've got all of these people from diverse ethnic and cultural backgrounds being successful. You have Naomi Osaka coming up. So basically, you have basically Japanese of color. You have Japanese people who have mixed African heritage. And in her case, Caribbean heritage. And this is great. It's great for Japanese getting accustomed to the idea that they live in a multi-ethnic society. It's also great for the kids growing up, to basically see role models that look like themselves that they can relate to. So my McNeil's shock at this was, so finally there's a up and coming tennis star, a Japanese of color. And yet the anime which they put out to promote her, this super cool world tennis champion, I mean, seriously, she doesn't even look Japanese. She looks Caucasian. She looks like my mom. I mean, yeah. So from an African American perspective, which Bai is very good at expressing, of course. You could immediately see this in a sinister light. You can see this as the old, literally whitewashing, right? Like taking, like in Hollywood, playing Gandhi with a white person, for example, playing, in Short Circuit, people blackening up their faces, or white people playing roles of, of people of color, different ethnicities, because they assume that it'll be more palatable and popular if they're white. And with the big culture and race debate in America, and through that lens, looking at Japan, this looks pretty terrible. And you would think, coming from America, how could anyone do this? But the point is, this isn't America, and this isn't coming from this isn't the same sort of era or the same sort of mindset as America. So the first thing is to understand the context, and Nissin themselves they tried to explain. They said, look, it wasn't intentional. They're coming for me, La Migra. So we had here basically their apology. In fact, where is the text of it? It must be at the top here, actually. Let me... Right, so they've got the ad that's been taken down, and where is the apology? Well, they apologized, and they basically said it wasn't intentional. And people would say, well, if you come from a place like America, you say, how is it not intentional? Surely you see everything as race. And what they pointed out is that, and actually the sort of news article kind of points out, this is not just in anime, by the way, as well. There is a thing in Japanese culture, and some people interpret it as looking up to white people and wanting to be white. It's not exactly that. It's not that simple. In most Asian cultures, even before white people were on the scene, there is a thing about equating pale skin to beauty. And frankly, this is something that happens in other cultures of people with more tan skin than us. So there is a beauty equivalent. So people always like to sort of appear lighter than they are. They wear makeup to do that. And it's not to imitate white people per se. It's just that it's the idea that people who if you're out in the sun working out in the fields, you'll get these tans. You'll basically look lower class, whereas rich people who are able to look after themselves historically were typically more sheltered from the sun, and they would look paler. The other thing in the modern age is that if you show up for a job interview in Japan, it's not considered a good look to show up like you've been, on a surfing trip. And one thing I'm actually kind of honestly envious of Japanese is Japanese can get pretty white. If they want to hide from the sun and really protect, and some people are really paranoid about doing it, they can be as white as me. And yet, when I go surfing, I have to put 10 liters of sun cream on, whereas my Japanese friends go and put nothing on. Now they come out and they look like Naomi Osaka. I mean, Japanese can naturally get really dark or really white. They've got this sort of skin that handles this. Whereas I've got skin from Yorkshire, that doesn't really deal with anything very well, other than maybe rain. So I've always been jealous of this. So this was a problem to me, because all the automatic machines that take ID photos, passport photos, resume photos, they all lighten the skin. They all basically take a photo, but they overexpose all the photos. And the idea is that Japanese people, when they put a photo on their CV, they always look paler. And this is equated to the idea that you've been locked in a room studying and working hard. It contributes to the sense that someone is diligent and trustworthy or whatever. And the idea of someone with a big smile and a suntan, even though of course even Japanese from a basically long line of Japanese sort of background, there's deviation. There are Japanese with darker skin and Japanese with paler skin, just like everywhere else. But generally the photo machines lighten the skin naturally. So this was a problem for me as someone who, multi-time winner of worst tan contests myself. When I first came to Japan, I got my first gaijin card photo taken. All that came out was a white background and an overexposed photo of worst tan champion, and all that came out was my eyes and my nostrils and my mouth. I mean, it was like a cartoon where they forgot to draw the lines around the edge of my face. So yeah, I've experienced this as well. I mean, hell, they whitewashed me. And believe me, I don't need any more whitewashing than I already have. So I looked at the comments at the wrong time just now. So yes, it's basically, this is a thing that Japanese culture kind of does. They do it without thinking, because frankly, again, there's always this assumption that Japanese can sort of be a broad range of skin colors, and sometimes I'll show this in anime, but generally anime characters are portrayed lighter. And Nissin is saying, hell, we weren't even thinking about this. But that's kind of the problem. I do like to always point out sometimes it's better when someone is actually evil and racist than innocent and ignorant, because at least if you're evil, you're in control of it. You know that you're doing it, and you can know when to turn it on and turn it off. If you're ignorant, you don't know that you're doing it, so you don't know to turn it off, and that's kind of more of a problem. So what Bai has done is he's really he's actually expressed the voice, not just of the outraged foreigner not seeing it from a Japanese perspective, but actually what I really like about him and what's important and what makes this whole thing kind of significant is that he's presuming to speak for, which again, he's stepping into shoes that are not his own perhaps, but he's presuming to explain it from the perspective of the multi-ethnic Japanese kids, particularly of African and dark-skinned heritage, that see her as a hero and see her being held up as a hero to all their friends, and as someone who basically helps people who maybe are self-conscious about their appearance and their ethnic difference from their classmates and their peers, to be seen in a really positive light. And there's this huge opportunity from that she represents to these kids, and not just her. There are all of these other particularly in different fields of sports at the moment coming up. So many Olympic athletes in Japan now have multi-ethnic heritages, and this is an opportunity to make the lives of those ordinary kids that are not Olympic athletes or tennis champions, better, to give a hero that everyone sort of recognizes and says, yeah, you're like her, you're cool. And they've kind of robbed that chance to both her and those kids. And so yeah, the result of that was Naomi, actually kind of gracefully, it's a sponsor, and so in the sponsor felt terrible and pulled the ad, which unfortunately means that she's not going to get as much money from the advertising campaign, which is kind of a negative outcome from this, because the idea is the lesson from this shouldn't be don't sponsor Naomi by all means. It's as she's pointing out, she would love if they'd consult with her to make sure that the image is being portrayed appropriately, and perhaps this is a good lesson for Japanese advertisers to pay attention to this where maybe they weren't in the past. So Bribes done a great job of raising this. It's been covered globally all over the world. It frankly, it looks terrible. It's not. I don't think it's as sinister or as bad as it looks, but at the same time, it is still dealing with a problem of ignorance that, as Bayer himself has pointed out, at a certain point, it's like the blackface thing. People have said, well, we don't know about blackface in Japan. Well, the first 10 times, you can kind of say you didn't know, but people should know better. And perhaps, again, dealing with, this is Japan's first ever Australian Open winner, so perhaps they can claim this is new, but this is a situation where Japan is learning in baby steps to basically the right way to embrace, and the intention clearly was to embrace and promote and hold up Naomi Osaka. It wasn't to denigrate her or misrepresent her, but clearly they're learning the appropriate way to do that, and that's a good thing. We're all growing. But yeah, and the optics are terrible, and maybe the optics aren't quite as bad as they appear to be looking from overseas, but at the same time, the badness of the optics presents the opportunity to learn, so that's a good thing. So everything coming to a happy conclusion, you'd think, except I was going through the news this morning, and again, what's clearly a really well-intentioned article, and if I click on the link here, the article is now totally different. So you see the story here in Japanese. I noticed this in my Hatena bookmarks this morning. Osaka Naomi dake de wa nai. 今や日本スポーツ界のis that I should have checked this first. Is that 防衛する多様人種アスリートの存在を考える. So there's one word that I tripped up on in the middle there, but basically this is a feature of it's not just Naomi. Check out all these other diverse multi-ethnic kids pulling along the success of Japanese sports. So a great story featuring all the other different multi-ethnic sports stars coming out of Japan at the moment. Great story to feature the day after Naomi won the tennis open. The problem is that the original story of this extremely positive story, the original title of this extremely positive story that was still showing up in the RSS feed that made me swallow my cornflakes for a moment, was, you can see there, Naomi dake de wa nai. 今や日本のスポーツ界を要因する非純血日本人. That literally means he or hai, that means not, it's an opposite. Jun means pure, and that's what's used for like when people talk about pure blood, and the next one is blood. So this is like Japanese with impure blood. It's like, wow, it's not just Naomi, there's all these other fantastic people who are Japanese with impure blood. Let's look at them. Somebody fortunately corrected that title quickly, and instead said a diverse race. But yeah, it's still, unfortunately for them, it's still there uncorrected in the RSS feed, and I saw that and I was like, is this like someone commented, is this like a Harry Potter episode? So again, Japan, baby steps. Baby steps, but still fantastic news, and from my perspective as well. And the other thing, I did make a comment on the Naomi win. not just great for her and for multi-ethnic kids in Japan, and not just in Japan. It's also, I mean, she is a multi-ethnic Japanese kid, not in Japan, and of course this is the thing about people. We're all over the place. We don't always conveniently fit into countries, and again, Naomi's a great example of this. She's, for intents and purposes, American. She's grown up in America to a Haitian dad and a Japanese mum, so kind of three nationalities or three identities going on there. So she's of course inspirational to you know, Japanese kids of African descent who are and Caribbean descent and African American and whatnot descent in Japan and so on. You know, it's great to see someone successful who's praised and loved, and you know, it opens doors for other people like her to follow, which is great. Also for, of course, Japanese abroad who often still struggle with their Japanese identity. To see someone like this being embraced in Japan, it's great for them too. But for all of that, I also think the thing which kind of I don't want to leave out of the narrative here is that this is so good for Haitian kids. And at the end of the day, Naomi played for Japan because Japan had the resources. You know, she could have chosen either one. She chose Japan partly because she's a Japanese citizen, but also because, you know, Japan has a tennis team and they have the resources and the coaching and so on, the backing, the sponsorships, everything else. You know, Haiti doesn't have any of this. Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world, and it's been through a ton of natural disasters, human disasters. It's a really struggling country, and the people there, you know, it's a country where the kids, you can imagine, don't see a lot of opportunity for people like them to be successful on the world stage. So the idea that a Haitian kid, which Naomi is, as much as she's Japanese, won the Australian Open and the US Open, I mean, this is something that I think Haitians should be celebrating, and people should be celebrating for Haiti as much as they are for multi-ethnic Japanese kids. Of course, I'm in Japan, I've got a multi-ethnic child. For me, it's great to see that, oh, isn't she doing great things for multi-ethnic Japanese? But fact is, the Haitians need her. You know, what she represents for Haitians is probably more significant even than it is for Japanese, although it's great for all those things. So as much as you want to say she's just a young girl, she's a tennis player, we shouldn't be putting all this pressure on her, I think we can still celebrate just all the great things. But she's aware of what she represents, and you know, and including with this whole kerfuffle. And so it's, I think she's stepping into that role with maturity ahead of her years, when she's being forced into the role, but she's, I think, embracing it the right way with humility, and she's being careful with what she says. Yeah, I think she's going to be a great influence for the next generations of Japanese who are definitely not homogenous like Japan's been until now. So all of that. Wow, I thought I wouldn't have enough time for today, but that's like the first story. I've only got a few more. But let's just rock through this, shall we? I've mentioned this before. The apprentice, the trainee apprenticeship work visa scheme in Japan. So at the same time that Japan has just opened the floodgates to basically allow 380,000 foreign workers come to Japan on more manual labor-oriented jobs in the next few years, and they're expecting that foreigners are just going to wait to jump at the chance to come and do low-paying jobs in Japan. Japan has a system for this at the moment called the apprenticeship trainee visa scheme, which is basically under which, on top of Mitsubishi, Panasonic now getting banned for abusing their workers and misleading them, within this as well, there have also been companies within which, and these are the first companies ever, so there have been all these stories of trainees basically disappearing, dying, being worked to death. Cases where trainees have basically, after having their passports held back and not receiving minimum wage, have murdered the people, their visa sponsors. There have been all of these cases, and until now, no one sponsoring anyone on these apprentice visas. There's been no enforcement against. The only enforcement has been against the trainees running away and getting collected by immigration police. There's been no actual enforcement against abusive employers. And Japan doesn't seem to appreciate that this is destroying Japan's, you know, nobody's going to come and want to work here if they see these stories about how mistreated so many of these foreign workers are. The Ministry of Justice has been challenged. Do you actually know how many people have died? And they've looked into it, and they've basically come back and they've said no. They cannot get basic figures right. They can't. They've looked into it, and they can't track, basically. They've done some numbers, and they found in the 8 years up to 2017, 174 trainees died, but they think there are more, they're not sure. And for this, again, with 174 trainees dying, some of them working to death, dying through overwork, it's only been this week that Mitsubishi Motors and Panasonic have actually faced enforcement where they've been banned now from sponsoring future trainees. The trainees, by the way, that are currently working for them will be allowed to find other jobs in Japan. They're not going to deport them, make them victims of this from the abuse of Mitsubishi Motors and Panasonic. But all of this time, again, Abe's kind of played a smart game with the immigrant, saying this isn't immigration, we're just going to let them in on short-term visas and they're not going to be allowed to permanently reside in Japan, so it's not immigration. They're just going to work here, pay taxes, fund the elderly's pensions, keep the economy going and leave, and we won't owe them anything. He seems to be pretty confident that it's going to work this way without appropriately setting up a framework for welcoming them. But again, we can already see what happens when you set up a system that just basically allows people to take advantage. And Japanese companies across the board are doing this, and the Japanese government doesn't seem to care what it's going to be doing to its current international reputation or to the prospects of attracting workers. And remember Japan is going to be competing against other economies for those workers to come and sustain the economy in future. They're torpedoing their future with this, and it's extremely frustrating and stupid. So yes, again, we'll keep watching that space, but just ridiculous from the Japanese government. The Ministry of Justice has to take over the apprenticeship system, and they have to start actually enforcing not just on the workers themselves, but on the employers that have been really, frankly, doing a lot of damage to Japan's image. Quinn Rankin, mistreated like Gon, you ask? No, not mistreated like Gon, because Gon is in detention. Gon's been mistreated the way that any suspect in a criminal case in Japan is mistreated, basically. They're detained for inordinate lengths of time with dodgy, basically, excuses for recharging people and extending their detentions to force confessions to let them off from having to investigate. This is different. These are basically workers who have been, basically, farms and whatever, that need cheap labour, and been able to take advantage of the scheme to basically underpay, mislead, and work to death, and frankly, by taking their passports and whatever, actually kidnap a lot of these workers. And the horror stories that come out of this visa scheme are terrible, and yet for all of it, the only people that until now the government's been enforcing this against are the people who escape and run away by arresting them and deporting them. Basically the farmers and the factories and so on employing them have been allowed to get away with it, and that's where the damage has been done. Another story with Japan this week that's kind of grabbed international headlines, somewhat embarrassing, but you may notice that one of the things that you may notice when you come to Japan, which is perhaps funny in this internet age, is that there are still basically huge adult magazine sections of the convenience store. Not only that, but basically, it still is a thing that is considered bad manners, but people do go and read magazines sometimes. It used to be more of a thing that when you had time to kill, and you didn't have a smartphone back in the day, you'd find a convenience store and you'd go and pick up a magazine and you'd start reading it, and you might stand there for like 20 minutes reading a magazine. Normally you'd at least feel guilty enough to pay for it at the end or put it back. But it's always been awkward that there's always been, in this convenience store where people got their families, where women go, everything, there have always been these basically straight up, different degrees of hardcore-ishness pornography there. Even today, most convenience stores have these. And there have been complaints, and some people have pointed out that although now all three of the main chains, so 7-Eleven, Lawson, and Family Mart, have announced that they will be withdrawing these magazines out of consideration of the number of foreigners coming to Japan and not wanting to give a bad impression to the foreigners coming to Japan with the Olympics coming up. Oh, and women too. There have been a lot of people tweeting. I noticed Mary Saito from Reuters and Hiroko Tabuchi from New York Times, Japanese women who work in foreign press, pointing out, it's not that they're doing this now because a foreigner's coming in that's strange. It's that they haven't done this at any time in the past when it's obviously so uncomfortable for a lot of women to have these around. It shows that basically how little consideration has been given to women by these companies in Japan until now. And certainly from anybody, frankly, it's a little bit mysterious that, I'm curious as to what the market for these magazines are. Given that you can pretty much now access anything that these magazines would have, not just anything that these magazines would have, in fact, more than these magazines would have, because of course in Japan they have to censor everything. So you can find everything that these have for free on the internet, anywhere, probably 10 times, worse or more exciting, or whatever gets anyone going for any genre of this. what kind of person walks into a convenience store nowadays to buy one of these? I mean, that's what I find. I can only assume that these have been dominated by people, elderly people, who just can't get into the internet and still want to get a fix. But I can't even imagine why would you walk up in a public, shop in front of kids with one of these bags? So it's always been a little bit mysterious to me that they've been there. I mean, I guess for the magazines themselves, when the convenience store stops selling them, it's going to be the end of their business unless they go digital. But it's amazing that, I mean, I guess this is a country which still sells newspapers and other magazines. So, but I imagine it's going to be the end of their businesses. The other aspect of this, which is kind of interesting, is that of course there are the obvious, straight up, undisputed pornography magazines that are there. But there's also this big grey category in Japan. Whenever you talk about the media in Japan and the idea that it's being influenced and manipulated by the government through the Kisha Club, the press club system, people always say, no, but look at the tabloids. The tabloids are raging with scandals and unauthorized stories, and they break all the big stories on Japan politics. So you can see the healthy, seedy underbelly of Japanese healthy journalism through the tabloids. And this is true. All of the these tabloids that basically aren't bound by the ethical and frankly the political constraints of much of the mainstream media will go out and they'll go and get the scoops on these stories. But again, what characterizes most of these sort of tabloid magazines and newspapers in Japan is that, again, for whatever reason in this day and age, they still basically have a page 3. They generally have a photo spread in the back or in the front, normally just topless. It's not like, and they'll have some adult ads somewhere in the middle of it. It's basically, it's like they're still trying to sell to 60-year-old men. It's like Playboy with the article, I buy it for the articles. The thing is, these things actually have good journalists who actually do good stories, but for whatever reason, they still put boobs in the back of them. And I remember when I worked at a Japanese company in New Zealand, and they had them in the cafeteria, and they had like the Japanese manga, they had the Japanese fashion magazines, and they had these Friday magazines and Flash magazines that basically always have a sort of a racy looking cover and a sort of a spread at the back, topless, and kind of harmless, but still, just basically women posing, and the rest of it is a relatively, well, again, somewhat salacious, but still a magazine, it's a news magazine. And I remember there was a New Zealand, I perhaps should have been more offended and done something about this myself, but I kind of looked at it as kind of curious, like it didn't particularly bother me, and I wasn't maybe thinking of anyone else, but when a New Zealand female employee, and there were only like 5 of us out of 50 in the shop, the rest were all Japanese working holiday people, she found one of these magazines, she flipped it open, she saw the boobs and lost it. She picked up all of them. She picked all of them out from the magazine rack in the cafeteria. She walked into the Japanese boss's office. She threw them down on the desk, gave him a glare, and didn't say anything to him, and stormed out. And apparently the Japanese manager, highly confused by this incident, went and walked up to the New Zealand manager, and I heard later that he went up and said, hey, what's the problem? He had no idea. And this is kind of what happens with Japan, right? It's the Naomi Osaka thing, it's the boobs in the magazines. It's basically run by people who just don't even have a clue about this sort of thing. And that's kind of probably basically why these things are still there. It's like basically you have the people who are the ones making the decisions really don't get a clue from the 90% of the population that thinks, yeah, that's really actually a bit awkward and you shouldn't do that. And they just don't have a clue, and they go on, they're finally correcting it, but they're finally correcting it now out of embarrassment that someone like me might see them. If foreigners looking at Japanese pornography, it makes you sufficiently uncomfortable to take these off, I mean, seriously, nobody looks at these magazines who are foreigners. You've got much bigger problems than taking these magazines off the shelves. But that said, these shouldn't have been on the shelves in the first place. So I guess good move to the convenience stores. I mean, these are family. It's literally called Family Mart. I mean, the fact that you always take your kid past the stand that has the exotic housewives on motorbike section. I mean, no. Like I say, it doesn't particularly motivate me, but it's clearly not right, and it clearly should have been fixed, if not for the embarrassment at foreigners seeing it, geez, for just thinking about everybody else in your own freaking society. So good news there, I suppose. Japan, moving forward in baby steps. Another story, 2/3 of Japanese view the rise of foreigners as good. Well, that's good, as long as they don't kill them, which has been happening, but again, baby steps. Slightly dark, and geez, it gets darker. I'm going to read this one really, really quickly because we're 10 minutes over. This was just a crime story. I don't like to do crime stories, but this is just to prove in a way that this happens in Japan just like everywhere else. Seiteki boko, which is basically rape, a sexual assault by they're basically multiple Keio universities. This is like the Harvard or Yale of Japan. This is basically one of the elite private universities in Japan, where the richest kids who can't get academically into a top university will go to Keio. They were all arrested and rearrested 5 times over the rape of a drunken fellow student. Have all basically, the prosecutors have decided not to proceed in Yokohama, which is kind of, I must admit, it does come up that they sometimes have corruption issues down there. So basically, the story is that a number of students who committed a sexual assault against an unconscious second-year university student at Keio, who were arrested 5 different times and associated with what looks like a gang rape. Prosecutors have looked at it and decided not to prosecute anybody involved. They've taken into account that the victim was unconscious. The perpetrators were all drunk and claimed to not be able to remember, and they've all paid different settlements with the victims. So they figure it all looks okay, and there's no reason to ruin the lives of these promising rich elite university students by charging them with gang rape. And you can see the comments basically. I mean, this happens, I know, in other countries as well, but basically commenters from Nichan who normally, kind of chauvinistic and whatever, but they're pointing out, hell, it looks like in the end of the day, if you've got enough money, you could even get off a rape charge. These sort of connections, basically, Keio University, old boy connections, clearly they can get people off for anything. Well, that's, it's depressing, it's kind of outrageous. I tweeted this and a lot of people sort of caught it and retweeted, so there's that. Horrible, but it happens everywhere, and it's kind of good that people are at least calling attention to it. It's ridiculous. Speaking of Mari Saito, who I mentioned earlier, she actually wrote the story on the chilling of the perceived chilling, I suppose, effect of new management on the Japan Times. Specifically, there was a taker of the Japan Times. The Japan Times, by the way, it's kind of funny. It's, in terms of circulation, in terms of the community that it serves, is like 30,000 native English speakers in Tokyo, like 60,000 in Japan. It has a circulation of something like 45,000, I think. It's basically like a country town newspaper in terms of its circulation, but because it is the Japan Times, it is the English voice sort of Japan, it has a really big impact. And it's got a, basically it does have a cast of reporters, I must admit, of varying quality at times, but basically, it's got people who basically speak to power, people with journalistic principles, that has always, not hesitated to have an editorial line that's been critical of the government and, kind of open and challenging on history, on political matters and historical matters. Being a small paper, however, it was struggling with its business, and it was acquired by a Japanese group of, kind of an obscure group of advertising, basically linked Japanese companies, that put a new president in charge, and they said, we're not going to really change anything, although the journalists at the magazine, at the newspaper, were a little bit scared of this. And what really came out was, I think I mentioned a few months ago, when the story came out, that they've issued a new guideline and an editorial. The owners put forward an editorial saying that we're not going to call the comfort women sex slaves anymore, we're going to call them, I forget their full, it's a really long description, but it's basically women who worked in sex jobs and were sometimes forced into it. Basically reinforcing the Japanese government, coming more into line with the Japanese government narrative that these were by and large willing prostitutes, and maybe there were a couple who weren't, so basically putting a kind of on these sorts of issues which are really significant for how Japan interacts with other countries. They basically redefined the key sort of terms in a way that was basically adopting the Japanese government line. And of course this deeply upset a lot of the journalists who work at the Japan Times, and someone from Reuters went and did a story here going through the tensions within the Japan Times and their new Japanese management over the attempts of the Japanese management to basically bring the paper into line with sort of mainstream, frankly conservative views on Japanese history and political matters. It's a good read, it's worth reading for understanding what's going on kind of in this newspaper, and the idea that this is getting challenged. and the newspaper editors themselves and their view that, you know, the paper has a disproportionate significant influence, and, you know, they need to be responsible and make sure that, and the editors that they came out apparently to the journalists saying that they feel that they have an obligation to put forward the Japanese perspective on these events and not take the side of Japan's anti-Japanese perspectives. But again, the fact that they're saying this is anti-Japanese perspective shows that they're kind of coming in with a line of a nationalist perspective. The idea that it's not, you know, that you're not supposed to be critical of your own country, which is of course ridiculous. I mean, that's what the purpose of journalism is to be critical of yourself and everybody else. So interesting story there on what's been happening at the Japan Times. And the Labour Ministry, I'll come back to this another week, they've done a statistical survey where they found 21 different statistical, actually no, 22. Was it 23? Perhaps it was 20. Well, this is a problem. They can't count. They don't know how many statistical surveys were wrong, but it was 20 something. The different results of this mean that basically unemployment data and unemployment benefits have been underpaid to people. They've been basically economic measures. There was a joke newspaper in Japan that put out a story during the middle of the week saying that you know, the Japanese Bureau of Statistics took out another survey that found 100% of respondents found that they trust Japanese government statistical surveys. It's just kind of crazy. And this one's had a real impact on the lives of people that have been underpaid as a result, so they're getting kind of bashed over that at the moment. The Tokyo government wants people to get on the subway earlier to sort of lessen the morning rushes. Again, they're worried about the Olympics and the ability of the transport system to cope with all the extra tourists during the Olympics. They're saying to people, please, let's not all commute at the same time. In order to incentivize people to commute at better times, later or earlier, they're going to offer noodle packs for free to people who do that. I was like, would that work? And I turned to my co-worker friend, he said, yeah, that would work. Like, geez, I wish I'd known that all along. Sony is moving its base from Europe to Holland because they don't want to be, basically, they might as well be in Japan if they're in the UK after Brexit, especially if they do it without a deal. And that's really it. Oh yeah, the final thing I want to show you this week. So this, can I show this? Hopefully this will show up properly. This guy did a, oh, can I show this? Can I show this? Boom, 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 boom. This guy basically, this person was coming on a flight to Japan, and he captured on a JAL flight the shots on a screen that basically showed photos of kind of like guidance for foreigners on avoiding crime, and you know, it's amazing. It's like it's got these little captions with these two foreigners riding a bus. Oh my god, the bus is so clean, you know, and basically just being wowed at how, like, yeah, it's just a kind of surreal video series with all these screen caps that I can't seem to display. So I guess check out my Twitter. I'll retweet it again. It's totally awesome. You have to read it. It's you'd think it was a joke. It's actually serious. So anyway, that's it. That's the topics for this week. It's been a long show, and I've totally missed a whole lot. Good morning, Odie Jr. Good to see you. I'm going to say hello to the people who said hello to me in the comments with the @ mark. Remember to like, please. If you like this, like it. If you like the short videos, please make sure you watch them. Tell your friends. I want to get some subscribers, get some momentum behind the channel again, and hope you enjoyed the show. It's been long again. Geez, I thought I was going to be quick, but there we go. That's what she said. So in terms of the people who shot out things to me, there's from Setsuna. Hiko Simon, you reached out to Rochelle after watching her in my videos, and she put me in touch with some recruiters for jobs in Japan. Awesome, Setsuna. That is great news, and she's a great person to talk to, and that's a great series to also watch if you are into the idea of getting jobs in Japan and knowing what to expect. That's what we do it for. Sergeant Bilko, indeed, that was probably La Migra. They're on to me. Yes, indeed. Hear that every week. Please remember, if you like the video, like the video, because I do appreciate that and it does help. And Odie Jr., boom, good morning. The J Vlog, speaking of which, has the company YOLO hit you up to write for them? Had an offer come in the other day that I'm not qualified for. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Nobody's asked me to write for them, but always happy to help people out with that sort of stuff. And indeed, thank you to everybody for watching. I'm sorry it went late this week, but yeah, I guess lots to talk about. So look out for some shorts. Look out for this Wednesday for the next episode of Japan Business Time, and see you next week. Boom. Remember, keep watching my Chan TV. Peace. Boom, 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 boom. End the show. awkward ending.